Hey guys, welcome to the video. So today we're going to have a look at several samples here and see if we can find the BPM for them. One of the things that Mpc has, it's an actual BPM detection right there, okay? And we can see straight away what the BPM is of that sample. After you load up a sample to the MPC, it will show you straight away right there. You can try and go if it hasn't and click on the detect button right there. And it will tell you what the BPM is. So it's very simple nowadays to find the BPM. You just need to go to the detection right there, detect the BPM, and it will give you the BPM for the sample. So you don't have to do much nowadays to find the BPM. Now, it's not 100% accurate, okay? So you might need to go and do some workaround sometimes, and that's what we're going to have a look at. Let's see other ways of finding the BPM. And it's telling us 173. Okay, that's definitely not the BPM for it. But it actually is in a way, because what it is doing is doubling the BPM amount. So the actual BPM of this loop should be half of that. So it's 87. So 173.96, so it's 174, and half of that, it's 87 BPM. It's accurate, but it's actually doubling the BPM right there. Okay, sometimes that happens. Some other times it's quite accurate and you can trust that BPM right there. So there's not much that you need to do to find the BPM. One of the good ways of doing it is just to use your ears. I use my ears all the time when I want to find the BPM. I just find it very relying to use the ears and see if it's looping okay and see if the metronome is hitting along with the sample at the same rate. So I prefer to use my ears all the time, and that's what we're going to do now. So we have a drum loop right here. Let's put this drum loop, let's assign it here to the pad. So pad A1, here we have our drum loop, and we're going to go to the metronome, and we have an option here that says record plus play, and it's enabled while the loop is playing. Okay, so it's enabled during recording and playing at the same time. So we're going to use that feature so we can hear the metronome while the loop is playing. Okay, let's do that. And I'm going to record the drum loop as well. Okay, so we can now listen to both of them and just try to match the metronome with the drum loop. Always start from the beginning again. BPM is going too fast. It was hitting quite well, but after a while they start shifting apart, so it's not that accurate. And as we saw in the beginning, it was 87. So let's keep the 87 now and see if it the BPM of the loop with the metronome, let's see if they sync together. Let's listen to that. And it sounds perfect. I find that to be the most reliable way of doing it. I always like to listen to a sample and see if it loops well, see if the metronome is clicking right along with the sample, see if everything is correct that way. So I prefer to use my ears all the time, and that's what I recommend everyone doing. Just use your ears. Okay, let's have a look at another sample. Let's do the same thing. So if you come here to the sample edit, let's choose another sample. We have another drums. I don't want to use that one, so let's use this one, keys. Okay, so we have this sample here as well. Let's try and do the same thing. So it's given us a detection already of 90 BPM, 91 because it's 90.80. So let's assign this again. Let's assign it to this pad. Do it. Back to the main. So let's just go to a clean sequence. Let's record the sample. And it said there was 90, so let's try and dial in 90 and see how it sounds with the metronome. Actually, it said 91. So it's saying that the BPM for it is 90.80. So it's saying like it's 91. So let's try 91 and see how it sounds. So you see that it's a bit off tempo because the sample is actually 90. So sometimes, as I said, it's not that accurate. It gives you a rough estimate. I shouldn't say that it's not accurate. It's actually quite very close to what the BPM is. But you should always use your ears. So as we see right here, it's 90, not 91. And you can listen to the BPM, to the metronome, and to the sample at the same time, and you'll hear that they both sound in sync at 90 BPM. They sound perfect. Okay, but there's another way. We now know that the BPM is 90, but let's say we don't know the BPM for this sample. So let's go here to the program edit, and there's a way of us doing this. If you see right there at the top, you have the time unit. Okay, and the time unit is set for bars. So you see the 2.1, 3.1, 4.1, 5.1. Okay, if we put this to warp, you see that they're all matching the transients right there. Okay, and this is another way of finding the BPM. You put the sample to warp, and then you need to have this BPM sync on as well, and then you just move the BPM until you find those transients hitting at the same place altogether. So it's 90 as we saw, and you can see right there, let me zoom in, that they are all hitting very in time, or very close to the actual transients of the sample. So this is another way. If you don't know the BPM for the sample, you can find it right here. Okay, you just dial in the BPMs until you see the transients aligning with the bars of the loop. And there we go, 90. That's perfect. That's the BPM. And now because the sample is set to warp, it's just going to fit perfectly within the sequence. And you can move the sequence as well. Let's recap once again. One way, the sample edit, the MPC will automatically detect the BPM. Not 100% accurate, okay? The other way, just to use your ears. Assign the sample to a pad, record the sample, and then while it's playing, have the metronome on during play, and just listen to the sample and make sure that the metronome and the sample are hitting at the same time. That's another way. Another way of doing it is going to the program edit and matching the beginning of the bar to the sample right there. Okay, you need to have the warp function on, otherwise it won't work. Okay, so have the warp function on. BPM sync needs to be on as well, and then you can find your BPM that way. Okay, doesn't work every time, but it works for most samples that have a big transient, and you can, because some samples are off tempo, and that can be quite hard to actually find the BPM this way. So I would use just my ears once again, have the metronome ticking, and just listening to the sample at the same time. Okay, you can also use the tap tempo, okay, to give you a rough estimate of what the sample BPM is. Okay, let's go to a different sample right here. So we have this one. So in this sample, the MPC is detecting it to have 120 BPM. That's wrong because this sample is actually belongs to this song. So this sample right here, we know that's 90 BPM. We saw that already. Okay, and this one right here belongs to the same song, so it's 90 BPM as well. But the MPC is giving us a detection of 120, so that's wrong. And that's why sometimes you should just listen to the sample, maybe work with a tap tempo. Let's have a look at that. So let's assign this to a pad, put it right there to it. So now we're just gonna play the sample and use the tap tempo to give us a rough estimate of what the sample BPM is. Let's listen. Okay, and the BPM will jump to the tempo that you were given while you were hitting the tap tempo. Okay, when you tap the tap tempo, the BPM will move accordingly to the speed that you are tapping in. So that's the tap tempo, obviously. So when you listen to a sample, you can tap tempo at the same time and it will give you a rough estimate of what the BPM is. Not very accurate, but it's good to know around which area you are going to be looking for that BPM. So that's very useful. We already know that's 90 BPM because this sample right here belongs to this sample. But if you have a look at that sample, you'll see that it will be very hard, even though we know that it's 90 BPM. You will see that the bars there, they're not in sync with the sample. And that's because when this sample was created, it was played, it's played a bit off tempo. So it's kind of creating a swing to it. It's very hard to read this way. And that's why the MPC couldn't recognize it as well. Okay, so again, the best way to do it is just to listen to the sample and to see what the BPM is. So you'll have the metronome on, you'll have the click on while the sample is playing and see where it fits that way. Let's put the drums to warp as well. Okay, so we can actually have a look right here. Let's try to find the BPM. So we already said that the BPM is 87. Okay, and you'll see that the bars right there, they will actually fit very well because it's a drum loop. All the transients are popping out, they're all showing, and you'll see that they are all going to fit very well. Let's have a look at that right there. Boom. Okay, that's it. 87, 86.96. But you see that everything, it's just on point. A bit slight to the back, up to the front there, but it's very, very accurate. This is the BPM. Okay. You have to be careful because sometimes some samples do have a certain swing to it, which means some notes will be a bit further ahead to the grid or slightly behind the grid. So they have their swing on. So it means that they won't hit right there on the bar as you see it right there. Okay, but we can assume that it's on time. Okay, so you see everything quite on time right there. And if you even go a bit lower, you'll see that everything's starting to get away from the transients. Okay, so that's the tempo. It's 87, 86.96, 87. So everything's warping and they should all play perfectly. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's just have a look at another thing right here. Let's get back here to the sample edit. This is the same sample. and it has an audio tail. So it reaches the end of the loop, but you know, you have that audio tail, that release at the end of the sample. So the sample is not cut right at the end, which means it's a bit harder for the machine to find the BPM. So if you cut it at the end, it's still giving the same 120, which is not right. We already saw that it's 90 BPM, but there's another way of actually finding. And if you have an exact loop from beginning to end and it finishes right at the end where it starts to loop, once you have that loop, that perfect loop with no audio tail, you can come here to the process. Okay, go to the time stretch, and you can say how many beats are in the loop. So we know that the loop, it's a 4-bar loop, which means 16 beats. And there we go, original tempo, 90 BPM. Now you do need to have an accurate loop that stops right at the end of the loop. It doesn't have an audio tail. If you have that, this will not work, okay? Finding bars, it's very simple. You just count them out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we counted 4 times. So that's 16, which means 4 bars, 16 beats. And that's how you count bars and how you count the beats as well. Once you know that, you can easily go to the time stretch, type in the amount of beats, and it will give you the exact BPM of that loop. Okay, again, you need to have a loop that doesn't have an audio tail. It finishes right at the end where it's going to repeat again. Okay, for example, this is the same loop, but it has an audio tail. Okay, this one doesn't have an audio tail. It finishes right at the end. And that's where the loop goes back to the beginning again. And this is why we can come here and say, look, this is 16 beats, 4 bars, and it tells you straight away, this is the original tempo. This is very good just to use, not to use the time stretch. You're not going to press do it or anything. It's just a good way to find the tempo, the BPM of the sample, okay? So this one doesn't have an audio tail. If you come to this one, that does have an audio tail at the end. Okay, if you try to do the same thing, it's going to tell you that the original tempo, it's 75, because what it does, when you give the amount of beats, it's going to divide the length of the loop. It's going to divide it into 16 sections, and it's going to say, okay, these 16 sections amount to this BPM right here. And that's how it calculates the BPM here in this section. So if you do have a loop that's quite exact, you just come here, say the amount of beats, and boom, you have the exact BPM right there. So these are the ways of finding the BPM, okay? 4 or 5 ways, very, very useful. It really depends sometimes how you want to do it. I prefer to always use my ears all the time, even though we have pretty good tools with the MPC, and the auto detection most of the times is quite accurate. So guys, if you do have any questions, if I wasn't clear on some of these things, please let me know, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.